In early January 1913, a lone figure stumbled across the Antarctic ice. His hair was matted, his skin blackened with frostbite, and his feet were so decayed that the soles had separated from the flesh. He had been walking for weeks, dragging a sled loaded with rocks, scientific samples he refused to abandon. Behind him lay a trail of horror. Two dead companions, one who had fallen into a crevasse, another who had gone mad and poisoned himself. The man was Douglas Mawson, leader of the Australasian Antarctic expedition. He had set out with two others to map the unknown coast. Now he was alone, 300 miles from base, with no food, no tent, and a body that was literally falling apart. Yet he kept moving, one agonizing step at a time, because stopping meant death. This is the story of the Mawson Death March, a journey that pushed human endurance to its absolute limit and left a man crawling back from the grave. The Australasian Antarctic expedition of 1911 was the brainchild of Douglas Mawson, a 29-year-old geologist already famous for his work on the Shackleton expedition. Mawson was a man of science, driven not by fame but by a relentless curiosity to unlock the secrets of the southern continent. He secured funding from the Australian government and private donors and assembled a team of 31 men, scientists, surveyors, photographers, and support crew. Their mission: to explore and map the 2,000-mile coastline south of Australia, a region completely unknown. Unlike the race to the South Pole, this was pure exploration. Mawson established two bases, one on Macquarie Island and the main base at Cape Denison, Commonwealth Bay. The location proved brutal. It was the windiest place on Earth, with gusts exceeding 200 miles per hour. But the team was young, optimistic, and eager. They had no idea that within 2 years, 3 of them would be dead and the leader would be crawling back alone. On November 10, 1912, Mawson set out on the expedition's most ambitious journey, a 600-mile round trip to explore the unknown coast to the east. He was accompanied by 2 men, Belgrave Ninnis, a young British lieutenant, and Xavier Mertz, a Swiss ski champion and mountaineer. They had 3 sledges and 16 dogs, loaded with 6 weeks of food. The early days were filled with optimism. The weather, though cold, was manageable. The dogs pulled well, and the 3 men worked in harmony. They traveled across the immense, featureless ice sheet, stopping to take scientific readings and collect rock samples. By December 12th, they had covered 300 miles and discovered a new stretch of coastline, which Mawson named King George V Land. They were ahead of schedule, and morale was high. None of them knew that the worst was yet to come, that the very next day would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter their world. The first warning came on December 14, 1912. The team was crossing a snow bridge over a hidden crevasse field. Ninnis, traveling ahead with the best dogs, broke through. Mawson and Mertz heard the crash of splintering snow, then a muffled thud. They rushed to the edge and peered into a dark chasm 108 feet deep. At the bottom, they could see the wreckage of the sled, the bodies of 6 dogs, and Ninnis himself, motionless. He had died instantly, but the horror was just beginning. The sled that fell carried the tent, the stove, most of the food, and all of the dog rations. Mawson and Mertz were left with almost nothing: a few days' food, a spare tent fly, no stove, and only the weakest dogs. They were 300 miles from base, in the most hostile environment on Earth. Mawson wrote in his diary, "It is a terrible disaster. We are in a very serious position." They had to turn back immediately, but with meager supplies and a long, desperate journey ahead. Mawson and Mertz were now in a race against death. They had only a few days of food and a handful of weak dogs. To survive, they would have to eat the dogs themselves. The 2 men butchered the remaining animals one by one and ate the meat. But dog meat is low in fat and high in protein, and without a stove, they had to eat it raw. Worse, they ate the livers, a fatal mistake. The liver of sled dogs contains toxic levels of vitamin A, which causes hypervitaminosis. Within days, both men began to suffer. Their skin peeled, their hair fell out, and they were racked by nausea and pain. Mertz deteriorated faster. He became delirious, thrashing in his sleep, and began to lose his mind. Mawson, though also sick, tried to care for him. They made slow progress, covering only a few miles a day. The landscape was a hellish white void, with no landmarks, only the howling wind and the relentless cold. By early January, Mertz could no longer walk. On January 7, 1913, Mertz died in his sleep. Mawson was now completely alone. He was 100 miles from base with little food, no tent, and a body that was falling apart. His feet were so frostbitten that the skin and nails were sloughing off. He could barely walk, but he knew that if he stopped, he would die. So he did something extraordinary. He cut his sled in half, reducing its weight. He kept only the most essential gear and the geological samples, rocks he had collected, which he considered priceless. Then he began to crawl. He rigged a sail from a spare tent fly to catch the wind and propel the sled. He made a harness for his shoulders and dragged himself forward. Each step was agony. His feet were open wounds, and he left bloody footprints in the snow. He hallucinated, seeing visions of food and warmth, but he kept going, 1 mile at a time. He had no choice. The base was still 100 miles away, and the only way out was through. The days blurred into a nightmare of pain and delirium. Mawson's body was breaking down. His skin peeled in sheets, his joints ached, and his mind played tricks. He saw phantom figures waving him on, then vanishing. He dreamed of warm fires and feasts, only to wake in the freezing darkness. On January 17th, he reached a supply depot he had cached earlier, a small stash of food and fuel. It saved his life, but the relief was temporary. He still had 50 miles to go, and a blizzard was building. He sheltered under his tent fly, waiting out the storm. When it cleared, he pushed on, but his feet were now so bad that he could only shuffle. He fell into crevasses twice, barely catching himself with his arms. Each time he clawed his way out, bleeding and exhausted. He began to talk to himself, reciting poetry and singing to stay sane. He later wrote, "I had passed the limit of endurance and was beyond caring." Yet he did not stop. On January 29, 1913, Mawson reached Aladdin's Cave, a small ice cave he had dug as a supply depot. Inside was food, fuel, and most importantly, a note. The note was from the base party, telling him that the ship, the Aurora, had arrived and was waiting. But the note was dated January 23rd. It also said that if he did not return by January 31st, the ship would leave. Mawson had 2 days to cover the remaining 20 miles, but a blizzard trapped him in the cave for 3 days. He watched the date pass, knowing the ship would sail without him. When the storm finally broke, he staggered out and made for the base. He arrived on February 8, 1913, to find a small relief party waiting. They had stayed behind, risking their own lives to search for him. When they saw him, a gaunt, blackened figure crawling toward them, they barely recognized him. He had lost half his body weight. His hair was gone, his feet were rotting, but he was alive. Mawson was rescued, but the cost was staggering. He had spent 34 days alone on the ice, covering 100 miles after Mertz's death. He was hospitalized for months, his body slowly healing. But the psychological scars ran deeper. He had watched his companions die, one by one. He had eaten his own dogs. He had crawled through hell. Yet he never lost his scientific drive. The rocks he had dragged across the ice, the ones that nearly killed him, proved to be invaluable. They contained rare minerals and provided the first evidence of the Antarctic continent's geological connection to Australia. Mawson returned to a hero's welcome in Australia, but he was haunted by the experience. He later led another expedition, but the memory of the death march never left him. He died in 1958 at the age of 76, having lived a full life. But for those 34 days in 1913, he had walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and he had come out the other side. The Mawson Death March stands as one of the most harrowing survival stories in the history of exploration. It is a testament to the human will to live, even when every fiber of the body screams to give up. But it is also a cautionary tale, a reminder that the Antarctic is a place that does not forgive mistakes. Mawson's decision to push on alone, to drag those rocks, to refuse to die, has inspired generations. Yet it also raises uncomfortable questions. Was he reckless to continue after Ninnis fell? Should he have abandoned the samples to save weight? The debate rages on. What is certain is that Mawson's journey pushed the limits of human endurance further than almost any before or since. If you want to see more stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary odds, subscribe to Doomed Expeditions. We bring you the true stories of those who ventured into the unknown and those who never came back. Subscribe now and never miss a descent into history's most tragic journeys.